Hello, I'm Kobe. I'm going to be giving you a crash course today on Protopie. Hopefully we're going to start off with some basics and the understanding of Protopie, but very quickly we're going to jump into some more advanced skills like using formulas and variables, as well as some conditional statements and even some sends and receives, which hopefully we're going to put all of that together and you and me both will have fully prototyped a Spotify music player. So let's get going. Okay, so this will hopefully be what our final prototype looks like. We have our Spotify homepage, a little animation up here to show our playlist. Down here in our live tab, we see our song and our progress, as well as a play pause. Additionally, if we click on our live tab, we get that video that loops along with the song being played. We have our current time, our remaining time, and our progress bar. We also have play pause that also works here. And we have a tracker on our progress bar to slide left and right, where we can fast forward the song or rewind the song. As well as we have a player that can be dragged down and disappear once we let go. So let's get started. All right, we're going to start here in Figma. This file will be linked in the description. It has a couple workshops that I highly recommend, some understandings about how triggers responses work, my most used shortcuts, some understandings on how to export into Protopie from Figma, as well as the media assets you will need, which will also be linked in the description, and a quick breakdown of my starting flow once I've imported my scene into Protopie. So here's our scene right here. I've already gone through the trouble of pre-designing all of our assets here in Figma. If you guys want to, feel free to go in and change anything that you would like about these existing designs. You guys could make this with a different audio, different video. You don't have to use my profile or any of my existing Spotify recommended, but it's here for you if you would like to change it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to want to take our designs here in Figma and we're going to want to export them to Protopie. So using this handy little cheat sheet, we're just going to follow the steps. So first what we're going to do is we're going to open up our Protopie app. Now that that's opened, we're going to go over to our screens, and just like it says here, we're going to click on our frames that we want to export. So in this case, I want my home, and I want my player here in my app screens, and we're simply going to export it through the plugin. So I'll move up to plugins. I will type in Protopie. It comes up for me already because I've already searched it, but we're going to type in Protopie. First thing we're going to select, and then right here, perfect. We're going to simply export our screens into Protopie. It may take a sec, but it's pretty quick. And once they're loaded in, we should be all set with all of our existing assets that were here in Figma directly exported into Protopie. All right, we're now looking great. We have both our screen number 1 and our screen number 2 for our home and our playing. So the first thing that I usually like to do is, again, I like to, once I've imported from Figma using the plugin, I like to make sure I've adjusted my settings. So my two screens right here are currently 414 and 896, which is an iPhone 11 or an iPhone XR, which is the phone I have. So if we scroll down in our device settings, which is right up here, we can choose from an iOS setting, Android, desktop, or custom. In this case, I already know what I want, which is an iOS, and this is going to be the iPhone 11 or Pro Max. I guess they're both the same density of pixels. So once we've selected that, that should correct our weird overlap that we were just having. So now we have all of our same components and structure that we had just in Figma, but now directly in Protopie. All right, great. So now we need to make sure that we have this player and this home. And we need to kind of break down what we're gonna do. My goal is that I'm gonna take this player, and when I select this button, it's gonna move up and we're gonna be able to see it, and we're gonna be able to play and pause and do all the functionalities I just showed. But currently, it's over here. So we could have, on our Figma, we could have taken our screen and put it inside the same screen, which is totally viable. But I wanted to show you that you can, on two different scenes, you can simply take your content, and in this case, I'm gonna do Shift G on all of my content. And right now I'm gonna double click, or I could Control R and I could call it player. And I'm just here to show you that I can simply Control X, copy and paste directly into your Protopie scene. So now we don't have anything here. I don't need it, so I can simply click my scene and hit delete. Great. So now we have player, and then we have home grid and featured and subtabs and profile. I don't really like how messy this looks, so currently we have player and then we have our home. I'm gonna do the same thing I just did, which is if I hold shift and I select all of my items and I do Control G, I will group them. So now I'm gonna call this one home. So now I have two main frames in my scene, which is my home and my player. So I think the first thing that we should do is we want this player view to simply scroll up on a click of this button, this little live tab down here. So we're going to use Protopie's triggers. These are the main things that you're going to use when trying to make any prototype at all. And in this case, we're going to want to make our live tab down here. I just held Control and I could select through my existing frames. I didn't have to double select to get in. So I'm going to hold Control, I'll select, and I'm on my live tab. I'm on my live tab and I want to tap it. So my goal is I want it to tap and I want to move this player up. So let's do that. On tap, we want our live tab, which we have right here, live tab. We want to move it. And we want to move it up to the top. So that would be 0 pixels because currently it's down here, our player, and we want to move it up to the top. So let's move it up to the top. We hit 0. Move player to 0. So if I hit my preview, we should be able to see what happens if I click and see what happens when I move it up. So preview, click, and that's not good. What happened there? Okay, let's go back. Let's see what we did. So currently I have live tab, I click. It did move when I clicked the live tab, but it didn't seem to be moving the player. Oh, I see. Okay, over here in player, I have it set as live tab. So one thing I could do, which is either I could select player right here, or I could use this little search bar and I could say player. I want the player. Instead, I want that to move up to 0. That makes more sense. Okay, let's see how that looks now. So now all we have is our home screen. We click our live tab and bam, just like that. Our player is moved up from the bottom up into the main screen. Perfect. We're sitting pretty so far. Now, I'm hopefully gonna want to remove this current placeholder image and actually add our video, and hopefully add our music too. So let's start there. So up here, we have assets that we can add. We can add images, videos, audio, camera, or Lottie animations, as well as shapes inside Protopie, text input values, containers as well. But currently what we're looking for is video. And when I select video, I get a little tracker head, and I'm gonna try to select where I want this to go. So this is roughly the size of the video I want, but I will make sure I customize a little bit later. Currently, my video sits up here at the top above everything, but I actually want to drag it all the way down inside our player, just above our active video, which is actually just our placeholder image. So currently we have a video, and inside this frame, I actually want it to be the max width of all values. So I'm going to over here, make sure that is what it ends up as, which is 414 at width, and it was 896 as our height. Currently, it sits at this weird spot up here, so if we simply center everything, it should fit right in place. So currently we have this placeholder image. We don't actually need it anymore, so I'm going to delete that. Now we have our video, so I'm going to call it active video. And in our active video, we can simply move over here over to our detail screen and insert the video. Again, your video and audio should be in the description below in a zipped folder, and hopefully you should be able to access that for this. So selecting video, and I hit open. That doesn't look great. Currently, we have these weird black bars, which you can't really see the one down here, but you see it very much promptly up here. All it's trying to do here in Protopie is trying to match the active ratio that your video has coming in. So if I made it really long, it wants to keep that existing ratio, which is a great feature, but not for us right now. We actually want to apply the original ratio so it takes up the entire height of our box, which is what we're looking for. But now have this weird edge. So let's center it for one. And if we were to shrink the size of this frame, it would revert back to not having that original ratio applied because we are actively shrinking that content. So instead of trying to close in our video, we can instead head up to our player and in our details, scroll down to the bottom. And just like Figma, we have something called clip. Theirs is content, this is sublayers. If I hit clip, just like that, those areas are gone. Now everything's inside this player. So we have our video, active video, and what I want to do is when I turn on this preview and I turn on my prototype, I want it to play. So down here, I'm gonna say play automatically, and I'm gonna loop it because this is just a 4-second video and it loops just like Spotify. So down here are those two settings. So perfect. Now I have a video that should play on our preview. Before we get there, I'm going to add a audio. Hopefully this will be our music. So David Kushner Burn, I'm gonna hit open, and this can live anywhere on your scene and it will still play. So I don't have to actually put it in my frame for it to play. I'm just gonna put it up here for now so I can see it, but it's not in the way of everything else. Currently, I have my audio, which is my music, but I want it to do the same thing as my video, which is I want it to play automatically right when I start. I'll also select looping for now, just in case. We don't actually have any other songs we're gonna add, so I don't have to worry about that. So I'll just hit looping anyway. All right, great. So now we have a audio, we have a video, and we have a live tab that should work on move. So in this case, if we check our preview, there we go. There's a little music being played. And if I click my live tab, look at that. I get this animated video that loops. Perfect. All right, now we're running into an issue of we don't have anything else that's working. Currently, we can't even go back to our home, which theoretically this back button would do great for. So let's work on that next. So up here in our live tab, we just used a tap trigger. We're gonna do the same thing, but for this back button. So I've gone on and selected it, and I'll hit tap. Though, let's just say I wasn't selected back, and I wanted to do that same tap trigger. Up here, this select layer button will be highlighted as Protopie needs to know what you're actively trying to trigger so it knows what to be tapped on to do your action. So in this case, I'm gonna look up in the search bar right here, back. All it's doing is it's looking through all of the names of what you've named your layers. So in this case, I've named it back, so I can select back. And now I know it's gonna select that layer. So now, on tap of our back, I'm going to, down here in move. I wanna move our player. I don't wanna do the same issue as before. I'm not gonna leave it as back. I'm gonna change it using our search. I'm gonna search up player, and I wanna move it back to its original ratio because currently it moves it all the way up to 0. I wanna move it all the way back down. So, two things. One, if I select my player, I can view the current Y axis that it's currently on, and that means I know where it's positioned at the start. So I'll copy that. But as well, if you're ever hovering over a move of an object, it will put in a gray state your current value. So if I hadn't copied it, I could know where it currently is set. But in this case, I'm just gonna Control V and paste it right in. So now I have this tap, which is my back. I'm gonna move my player to 896. Though I don't currently love how this looks. These were labeled, these are not. I don't really know what these mean. So in tap, I'm gonna tap the back button and I'm gonna move my player. I didn't do it before, but I'm gonna start now, which is I need to make sure I know where I'm moving it because now I have two move players, which are gonna get kind of confusing. So I'm gonna use a hyphen and then an arrow key, and I'm gonna say move player to, and I think it was 896. I'm gonna do the same thing for up here so I can make sure that at a glance I know what I'm looking at. So player, I'm moving it to 0. So now I have a live tab and a tap back. So let's see if that works. In our preview, perfect, audio's playing. I select, I view, I hit back, I go back. Great, we're doing pretty good. Though I wanna do one quick tip about touch areas for triggers. We currently have our back arrow and it's pretty small. It is usable, but it's pretty small. I could scale up the size of this frame and I could shrink all of the content inside. That does work. But what I like about Protopie is if I select it back, I can move all the way down here to touch area, and I simply can increase the size of my touch area, which helps a lot with usability, specifically for me just in prototyping itself when I preview my own projects. So I've changed it up to 16, so that way, if I'm ever slightly off with where I'm clicking, it still knows within this radius, I'm just trying to click the back button. I think it's very useful. Okay, now we want to work on play and pause, because currently, once I get this music playing, it kind of just plays, which is great, but I want to have an ability to play and pause. So up here, we have our live tab, and over here, we have our play and pause. Currently, I've labeled it as play-pause and pause and vector. Vector is just showing, usually in Figma. If I didn't label it in Figma, it won't be labeled over here in Protopie. So I'm gonna relabel it now so I know what I'm using. So I'm gonna say play. So currently I have this button, which is play and pause, and I have a play, which currently has an opacity of 0. But if I were to turn it on, I were able to see the play button come in right in between that pause button. And I have the same thing with the pause. The pause is currently on, and if I were to turn it off, it would not be there. So what I want to do is I want to tap this play button, and I want the music, to pause. I want my play button to turn on its opacity. It's currently there, but I want its opacity to go to 100% so we can view it. And then I want to do the opposite with the pause button, which it's currently on, even though it's still in our layers. It's currently on at 100, but if I turn it off, even though it's still in our layers, we cannot see it. So that's my goal. So what do I need to do first? I need to figure out what I'm trying to select to add my trigger. So in this case, my play and pause. I want to add a trigger, and I wanted to add a tap trigger. So we're gonna tap, play, and pause. What do we want to have happen? First, I think we wanted to have our video to pause. So over here in playback, it will work for both video and audio, but in this case, we're looking for our audio. We want to pause our audio. Really, you can only do 3 things on playback: play, pause, and then seek to a different time within that video or audio. But in this case, we're doing pause. So playback, let's change that to pause audio. Okay, so now we're gonna move into our next thing, which currently we have our play pause clicked, and then it would play our audio. We want to change an opacity of our play button. Ooh, this is looking a little chaotic. I see play, I see play, I see play again. I'm getting a little overwhelmed with how many things there are over here, and I don't know which one's what. I have pre-done and -P for our player down here, but I haven't done anything for the one up here, and I don't want to get confused anymore. So before I click, let's actually move back on over here to our play button, and let's say play -H for home, and pause -H for pause on the home. Okay, let's try this again. So in opacity, I can simply, instead of doing play again, I could do -H. Look at that, it comes right up. So play H, we're gonna change our play button to 100% opacity, because currently it's 0. So we're gonna change opacity to play -H, and we're gonna change it to 100. So now I know in this little section, I'm gonna play H to 100. I'm gonna do the same thing, but in reverse. So we're gonna actually change our play button to our pause button, and we're gonna change it up here as well. And we're gonna change not only it from 100, but to 0. So we're gonna change it up there, and down here as well. So currently what should happen is when I click this play pause, I should pause the audio, I should change our play button to 100% opacity, and I should change our pause button to 0% opacity. So let's give it a go. Preview, here we go. We hear our audio, that's great. But now, look at that, our audio's paused. We're gonna run into an issue soon, which is if I select it again, nothing's gonna happen because we haven't actually made anything happen yet. So let's head back over Though we're gonna run into another issue, which is if I add all of these statements, pause and play, and I reverse them. So in this case, it said play audio, it changed our play button to 0% and our pause to 100, and I just simply copied and pasted and changed everything. It's gonna try to run all of these at the same time. That's not actually what we want. What we want is something down here, which is a condition. We wanna tell Protopie, once we've tapped it, if something is true, do those actions. In this case, we're gonna use a reference inside our own button, which we're gonna use, I'm gonna say the play opacity. The play opacity. So in this case, we're gonna take our condition and we're gonna go over to our select. We're gonna select our play, and over here, it will choose the detail in which you're referencing. So in this case, it's currently selected as the X value. So it's looking on Protopie and it's looking at your play and your X. We don't want the X value. What we want is our opacity value, because what we're gonna do here is we're gonna check to see if the opacity of that play button is 100. Because if it is 100, this has already run. We know the audio is paused, we know the pause button's at 0, and we know the play button's at 100. So that means if we were to go in here and add our playback and select our audio, and we were to play it instead of pause it, it should only play that audio if it's at 100. So it should only do that action if it's been pressed, is basically all we're doing. So play audio. And we're gonna do the same thing right here, but we're gonna do the inverse. So I'm just gonna copy and paste them. So I have my play H, I'm gonna move it to 0. We're gonna change it over here as well so I know exactly what I'm looking at. So play H is going to 0, and we're gonna change our pause to 100. So if I change our pause to 100, just like that, we have an action in which I tap and it's running through these, but if not, it's running through this. So let's preview. So if I run into my preview, I click play. Now my play icon is at 100. So if I select, it should return those values of playing the audio and flipping our opacities over to play and pause, just like that. Now we have audio again. So this is great. Now we have a working play pause button for our music. We have one issue we're gonna soon run into, which is if I pause the music here and I open it up here, it's still playing here because I haven't made this button functional either. All I've made is just this button. So let's work on making this button functional as well, and then we can sync the two together so that if I were to play and pause here, it should change the button down here as well. All right, so we already have an existing framework for play and pause that we have just worked through right here. We're gonna basically use the exact same process. So down here in this button, I'm using Control to zoom in and out as I move through the scroll wheel. So currently we have those two in place. We're actually gonna do basically the exact same thing that we just did. So if we simply hold Control and do D, so Control D, it will duplicate our existing triggers. So currently we have tap, play, pause, and pause audio. All of this is the exact same as up here. But now we want to one by one go through and change all of these to work for these buttons instead. The nice thing about that is, again, we have our search up here. So if I hit my tap, play, pause, I go up here and I do -P, just because that's what I had pre-labeled it as. We don't want play, pause. We wanted play, pause, -P. Perfect, that's in our player. Great, okay. Now we have this circle instead of that square because it will show you a preview of that image or that object that is currently in your scene. I'm gonna change that tap so I know which one I'm tapping. The audio, pause, and play are still gonna stay the same. We're not actually changing anything there, but we're gonna change which of our buttons are changing in opacity. So our play H, we're gonna change to our play -P, and right up here we'll hit select, and look at that. Right down here, again, it will show you that preview. And because these images of these icons are in that white box and they are filled with black, they will show their preview in black, unlike the ones in white up here. Just one good way to know that these are actually the different versions. So we're gonna do play -P to 100, We're going to change our pause. Oh wait, I selected the wrong one. Uh-oh. Play, no, pause. I'm tripping up already. All right, pause dash P, perfect. That's to 0. We do the same thing over here, play dash P, and we're gonna do pause. Wow, I am quite slow right now. All right, pause dash P. Oh, these are still all wonky. Let's change these to dash P for all of them, as we've already selected them. We just want to rename them just so at a quick glance we know what we're looking at. All right, perfect. Without doing much, we have simply made these pause and play buttons act on their own with these tap trigger and then these responses. So if we head into preview again, we'll hop up in our live tab. If I select this pause play button, pauses the audio, plays the audio. What? Something's not working. Let's go and check. Let's work through what we've done. So I've currently changed our tap, which seemed to be working, and when I clicked it, it did pause and it did change the icons. But why didn't it do any of these? Oh, here it is. Okay. Condition, still currently on play-h. So it's still referencing the first buttons up here. We want it to reference the buttons down here. So if we simply click our condition, go up to our select, and instead of selecting play H, we do play-P. Now it should be selecting play-P, which should be referencing our own buttons down here in our player. So I've hit preview. Let's try it again. I gotta play and pause up here. And down here I have this button that play and pauses. Great, we're doing pretty good. I know we haven't been working for too long and I've shown you a little bit about how to do taps, but we're gonna jump very quickly into something called send and receive. So currently we have these two, which is our play and our pause, and we want them to act in sync. So if I select this button, I also need to tell this button to change to play as well. I need them to both know what they're doing at the same time. So, though advanced, I think you guys could get it down pretty quickly. We have send and receive. So in our triggers, we have all of our touch triggers. We have our conditionals, our mouse, our keybinds, inputs, and then we also have sensors. Most of these sensors are on a phone, though we have one special one, which is receive. All receive does is it's gonna look for a action, in which case we have our actions here that we can do, but we're going to look for a send. All this does, I'm sending a message to the current scene of Protopie. I can name it whatever I want. I should probably actually name it something I know so I can reference it. So in this case, I could hit send play. So all I'm saying is I want it to send a message through Protopie that is telling the receive what to look for. So in this case, play. So I'm sending play's message to this receive. You may be saying, why is this important? What we're gonna do now is instead of having all of these triggers and actions inside each touch component individually, we'll simply be able to have this button send the action to the receive, and it should work for both buttons at the same time. I know that's a lot, but I will walk through. I know that's a lot, so I'm gonna walk through it to hopefully see. I know that's a lot, so hopefully we can walk through it and I can kind of show you that in action. So if we move our send play up to the top, so let's just say we're gonna work on our first one for now. So we have our button, we have our send play. What I want to have happen when I send play, it's gonna send that message and it's gonna send it to this receive because it's looking for that play message. Once it's received that message, I want it to complete an action. And in this case, I want it to complete all of the actions that I've already defined for my play and pause button. So I'm simply gonna Control X and I'm gonna paste it in. So now I have a receive play. So what it's currently gonna do is it's going to play the audio, pause the audio. That's not what I want. Let's actually change that up here before we confuse ourselves anymore. We're going to send pause and we're gonna receive pause because we're gonna be pausing our audio on this click. Pause and pause. All right, great, those two line up. Perfect. So if I tap, it sends a pause, shoots it over here to our receive, and from there, I'm going to pause the audio, and I'm going to change the two icons. The great thing about this is now all I have to do is I simply have to copy this message, paste it in our second tap trigger, and I simply can copy and paste all of those actions as well. So now what's going to happen is currently I could hit pause here, and it's going to send out that message over here. And what's going to happen is when it receives it, it's going to pause the audio. It's going to change that top icon for play, change that top icon for pause. It's going to pause the audio again. Let's get rid of that one. We only need to pause it once. But it should change the play value of the icon over here and change the values on the pause button down here. So it should do all of that on just sending messages to itself. So we currently have that for pause. Let's set up the exact same thing for play. So under our condition, I can simply hit send, and this time we're going to call it pause. Wait a second, and our messages, this is going to confuse us because it says play. So actually, before we do anything, we're going to go back to our pause buttons. We're going to change it to pause because we want the message to be pause, so we actually know what we're doing. Perfect. Okay, now it's sending a message of pause, and it's receiving the message of pause. No, it's not. It still says play because that's what we initially had it read as. But now, since these two are send pause, simply click it. Sometimes you have to work through a couple errors, but we'll get there. So now we have our next send, which this one is actually play. So I want to send the message play. So it should send play. And I'll move it up here to the top so I don't actually copy it. So I send pause and I send play. And I want to have a new trigger that's going to receive the play message, not pause this time. So receive play. Move it down here next to my other receive just so I can see where everything is. So up here I have my send play, and I can Control X, copy, and then paste it into our receive play. Now we can do the same thing over here in our second pause play button. If I simply copy everything over, again, I don't need two versions of play audio, I only need one. It should do the same actions, except for we still need a send play in our condition of our second pause play button. But now, what we have is two buttons that are doing the same actions. We're sending to pause and we're sending to play. And when we send those, it should do all of the versions of actions that we've already predefined, as well as either playing or pausing the audio. I know that was a lot, but let's give a preview on what we've got so far. So in our preview, we have our audio, which is great, and we should hit pause, and it should pause our music. We should hit play our music. It's a good sign. Now, if we change it to pause, and we open up our live tab, we've had our button down here change as well. It's great. So now if I play the audio down here, and I choose that back button, it's playing up here. Both of them are working in sync with each other. Okay, so far we're looking pretty good. We have a lot of content over here, and I'm getting a little overwhelmed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group my content based on what they are doing. So we have our live tab and our tab back, which is our open, close of our player. So that's up there. And then we currently have our pause play. So I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to group it, Control G, just like the same grouping actions as you had over here. And you're going to, let's label it as pause and play actions. That way, at a quick glance, I know what they still do, but I can keep them closed so I could add more triggers and I don't have a lot of things cluttering up this space. All right, let's focus down here on this little guy. We're gonna hopefully animate it so that as I'm in my home view, I get a little green animation of the music being played from my playlist. So I'm gonna move into this active card, and I currently have 3 lines. In Figma, you could take this component and duplicate it a couple times and smart animate each layer. But in this case, I don't want it to be smart animated. I don't want it to be the same frames. I want it to be random. So what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to change the height of the object at random, which we're gonna get into something really cool in formulas in a little bit. But first, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our lines We're gonna make them editable. And let's start with line number 3, it's our smallest. What I want it to do is that when I open up my preview, I want it to start animating up and down. So in that case, when I add a trigger, instead of having a tap or a touch target, I'm actually gonna do a start target, which basically means at the start of my prototype, something will happen. So in this case, start, and I'm gonna say with jump. I think in this case, it doesn't totally matter. I don't have anything that is gonna be that impacted with a couple milliseconds difference, but just with jump, we're gonna start, and what we want to do is we want to animate the scale of this line. So if I hit scale, and I type in line 3, which is our smallest one, currently we have a line height of 5, but the tallest it can be is 9. So we want to be able to scale it in between 5 and 9 over a period of time, which is going to be forever, because we want to animate just indefinitely as our prototype works. Currently we have 5, and I could type 8, and then I could duplicate it, and I could change it over here, and I could make it 6, and I could do that for infinity. But that gets a little too much. So what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna use our first ever formula. We're gonna change our scale of our line 3 scale. So currently we have our line 3 scale, and we're gonna change its height. But we're gonna use something right here, which is a formula. In here, you can hit the question mark, and you can load up Protopie's existing languages for formulas. I know it looks a little chaotic, but everything is written down right here, which make a big difference. They already have their existing content too. So in this case, I know in my formula, I want to use a specific function because I've already done this before. So I'll give you the quick one. But in this case, we want to go and we want to use our math, and we wanted to make a random value. So in our math, we have 3 different ones we could use, which is a random decimal number between 0 and 1. That's not really what we were looking for. We were looking for between 5 and 9. We got a random decimal number randomly between 2 numbers. Again, decimal number is not totally what we're looking for. Ooh, perfect. Okay, we got random interval of a whole number between 2 given numbers. This is exactly what we're looking for. So I could simply copy the example right here, or back in Protopie, in my formula, I could type out random int, random interval. And I wanted it to be between, oh, not my Figma, I wanted it to be between 2 values, which is the minimum height and the maximum height of our scale. So if we head back in, we want it to be a low of 5, but a high of 9. So currently I have it set to random. So if I preview it, it just changed height once, and it doesn't even look like it's in line. So we have 2 issues. One, pretty easy to solve. Currently, we have our lines. And right now, we have it set of our origin to be the middle. All that's doing is it basically means when I'm scaling, it's using that center origin point as reference. So if I were to scale it up, it would scale up from the center. So what I want to do instead is I actually want it to scale up from the bottom going up. So in that case, I'll go over here to our right on our line, and I'll go to the bottom. So now this bottom of this origin means if I scale up and down, it's using that bottom point as reference. It's not going to go any lower because that is our reference point. So now, theoretically, if I were to scale it to a random height, it should scale upwards. So that fixed one issue. We had another issue though, that it kind of just scaled once and then nothing ever happened. But that's because that's all we're having it do. Currently we have it where it scales to a random height in between these 2 numbers, and it scales at a duration of 0.2 seconds just once. But what we want to have happen is we want it to be repeating, and we want it to repeat infinitely. We could have it to a set count, but we know that this version wants to be repeating just forever. So in this case, if I were to go back into my preview, maybe small, but you can see the little guy going up right there, up and down every 0.2 seconds forever. Now all we have to do is do it for our other 2 lines, which should be easy. So all we have to do is duplicate our existing versions, and let's change the names on them, which that's going to be line 2. And let's change our select to line 2, So now we know what we're selecting. Over here in line 3, we're going to change it to line 1. And then one more time, we're going to change it to line 1. Now, on start, we should have line 3, 2, and 1 scale. Great. That's not looking great. That is moving, but it looks to be having the same issues as we just had with our far right line, because we never actually changed our line 2 or our line 3 origin. It looks like our line 3 origin is already set. So actually, all of our issues are just line 2, because our line 3 was set. Our line 1 wasn't set. Okay, so line 1 and line 2, these two need to be set down in our origin to the bottom. So let's give another preview of that. Look at that. We have our audio already playing, and we have a little audio animation to show what playlist is being selected as well. Perfect. All right, now we need to work on our next steps, which now we have our home done, but now we have a progress bar down here, and we have a progress bar down here that aren't really doing much. Let's start with the one down here. That's the one we could control. So currently we have this target, which is our tracker, and we want to be able to move it side to side so we can move our scale of our progress. Currently, it doesn't know where to go. So what we can start with is over here in our trigger, we could make our drag on our tracker, and we could tell it to move. And we want it to move side to side. So we want to be able to move it left and right all along that axis. So currently our limit's set to none, which if I preview that, if I go into our view and I hit tracker and I move it left to right, that's great. This is what we want. But if I move it too far left, it goes out of that progress bar, which is not really what we want. So again, if we move back into our drag, in our limit, we can change it to limit container. Limiting it to the container basically means it won't move past the existing parent container, in which case we have our progress right here. So if I were to move it left and right, it shouldn't leave outside those bounds. So live tab, check tracker, moving it left, moving it right, and it doesn't move past even if my cursor moves outside those bounds. That's great. All right, I'm gonna move my start up here to the top, just personal preference. I like start always at the top. I'm just gonna close it up for now because we are now working on something else, which is our drag, our tracker. We're dragging our tracker, and we're moving our tracker as well. So I know what we're dragging and what we're moving. So the next thing that we need to do is we wanna sync our progress to where the tracker is currently going. Because currently, if I move this tracker left and right, this progress bar does not know where it needs to go. But I want it to scale proportionally to what is the X value of this tracker. Currently, I have my tracker at an origin centered. So basically, I want this progress to always be aligned centered with this tracker. So if I add a trigger, and I add a really powerful trigger, which is detect, I'm always detecting one selected a layer. So in this case, I'm gonna do my tracker. I'm gonna do my tracker's X value. And what I'm looking for here is that this detection is gonna constantly be looking and telling Protopie what the value of the tracker's X value is. So if I'm on tracker and I'm 144 and I click and I drag it and I move it, it's gonna move to 238. Protopie knows that now. So Protopie has detected the tracker's X value, and from that X value, I want to scale. I don't wanna scale the tracker, but instead I wanna scale the progress bar down here. So I currently have that selected, and I wanna scale it to. The one problem here is that if I were to type in an individual value of the current length or the current X value of the tracker, which is 144, it will only move to that value. It will just stay there every time it detects. What we can do instead is we can do a formula. So we can do a formula, and in this case, we can look for a layer. In this case, we're gonna look for tracker, and we're gonna do period X. When I do dot, it gives me all the details on tracker that I can currently correlate values to. So it could be the opacity of the tracker or the scale. But in this case, I'm looking for the tracker's X value. So all it's going to do is every time it detects the tracker's X value move, it's going to tell the progress bar to scale to the value of the X of the tracker, which sounds a bit confusing, but what should happen is if I hit preview and I move down, and this time when I drag, this white bar should scale. It's scaling, not really the way that I intended, which 1 means it's partially working, but 2 means that we need to figure out why it's not working completely. So let's head back in. So we have our progress bar, and it looks to be the same thing that we had with line, where our current origin point is the center. So when I scale it out, it's not actually scaling over here from this left. So let's change that now. So we're gonna change it to its origin. And we also had this weird delayed scale effect, which didn't really look good because it should be instant when I scale or move the tracker. But that's all because of this. Basically, every time I detect movement, it's gonna tell it to change, but it's gonna tell it to change over a period of time, in this case, 0.2 seconds. We can do is we can simply move it to 0, basically instantly. When it detects, scale within 0 seconds, just the instant it happens. So now we have our progress bar to our left, and we have our scale to instant. So now in my preview, scroll down, I hit my tracker, and just like that, I have this button moving seamlessly. I do notice one thing though, if I scroll all the way over, this little left blip kind of goes square, but if I move it all the way out, it gets rounded again, which it seems to be an issue. Fuck, I don't want to do that. So currently we have this vector frame. We have this vector, which I think is on shrink, it's rounding the corner, which isn't exactly what I want. So what we could do instead is I could instead make this, instead of a vector, I could make this a shape in Protopie. So I could choose a rectangle and I could stretch it out. We wanted it to be, I think, 2 pixels in height. I want it to line up with the X. So let's call this progress P. We're gonna call it new, just so I know which one's which. So now what I can do here is I could change the color to white, just like it was earlier. And now, if I round the corners, since they're native to Protopie, it shouldn't change the weird stretch morph effect that was going on when I shrank. So this time, if I shrank all the way in, this one looks kind of like a rectangle. This one looks perfectly rounded as what we want. So in this case, I can simply swap them out for each other. So I'm gonna drag this progress bar back down. I'm gonna get rid of this one. Though, when I get rid of this one, currently, Protopie gets kind of mad at me because this scale now doesn't know what it's scaling. So, since we deleted that old progress, let's hop back in and do progress. And we're gonna do new, because that was the one we wanted. And I'm just gonna scale it back up to the width of our existing tracker. And I think we need to move our origin back down to the left. Perfect. Now, we should have a progress tracker that works perfectly, and we shouldn't have that weird scrunching effect that was happening right there. So, live tab, I can move left and right. Perfect, I don't get that weird scrunching effect that was just right there. I know it was a small thing, but you know, as a designer, I like to make sure everything's looking good. All right, let's see what we need to work on next. Currently, we have a player that plays and pause, and we have a little animation for here, and we have our progress bar. But we don't have our progress bar going with our music. So now we're gonna get into something really fun, which is variables. Oh, I accidentally selected a frame. Let's not do that. Let's close down here just for the second. And if you don't see variables, it always hides down here to a bottom left. I simply click it, pops up, and then I can get this little plus icon and I can add variables into my scene. So you have 2 options, one for all scenes or for just this scene. Currently, we only have one, so I'm just gonna do this scene because it doesn't totally correlate for me. And what we're gonna start by doing is we're gonna start by tracking a couple things. So in our variables can be used to store numbers, store text, or even store colors. It can be stored from assigning a trigger to change a variable. Though in this case, instead of storing a previous number of like 0 or 10, what we're actually gonna use it for is we're gonna use it for a formula. We're going to have the formula be a number, but in this case, we want to start to figure out what our total time of our song is going to be, as well as the current progress over time, and as well as our remaining time. All three of them are going to be very vital. One, because we can use our total time for reference, and our current time to know how far along our progress bar should be in our progress, as well as we also need to know these values for our text down here. So let's get started. Let's call this variable song total time. And up here in our number, instead of number, we're gonna not type anything in, but we're gonna hit use formula. And we're gonna click on our formula thing to enter. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna look for our song. Perfect. What we're gonna do now is dot. It's gonna give me all the details that I can use for reference in this formula. And what I'm gonna use for reference is the total time. All I'm asking for Protopie to do is to look at this audio length and look at how long it really is. So perfect, now we have that one. What we're gonna start doing up here at the top is right over here, right next to our variable. Now that we've added it, we have this little bug guy, which is our debug. So once I select it, it pops up to the top left of your scene. And I'm just gonna move it down so I can see it. And all I do now is that if I were to preview my prototype, I can see the variable and formula displayed right here. Also, if I'm in my scene, I can move this around. It doesn't affect anything, but I just like to keep them up here for now. So we got a couple more we need to add before we can get started. So we got our total time of our song, and we wanted our song's current time, and we're gonna use a formula again. We're gonna go over here, and we're gonna do a look for our audio. Perfect. We're gonna do current time. This time I typed it in, I know it's there, but again, you can always just scroll down to the bottom as well. So current time is the one I'm looking for. Perfect. Now debug as well. Now I can see it up here with my total time. And then we got two more that I want to do before I can start working. So we have our total time, we have our current time. We're going to do our song remaining time, and we're going to use that up here. We're going to go to our formula. What we're going to do here, there's no song dot remaining time, but we can do a little math. We can actually use the variables and do some math with those variables themselves. Since they are going to be specific numbers, we can simply take the total time and subtract it by the current time. And that should give us the remaining time left in the song. So let's drop it down here. And now we should see 1, our song's total time, 2, the time going backwards in correspondence with our current time. So this is how many seconds have gone by, and the same thing going right here for our remaining time, but in reverse. So perfect. Now, one last thing that I want to do before I get going is we have this progress bar down here, and we have all these new variables, but I want to be able to actually correlate the current time, and I want to take its percentage. So right now it looks like it's about 40% of the way through. I want the current time to tell me what percent of the total time it's taken up. That way I can take its percentage and I can simply times it by the width of this progress bar, and it should hopefully move the tracker and the progress to where it should be in the song. I know that was a lot, but I can show you how we do it all. So again, for the scene, we're gonna call this one percentage, perfect. And in our number, we're gonna do a formula. And instead of minusing it the time, we want to take our current time and we want to divide it by our song's total time. So we can get the exact percentage value of how much current time has been passed throughout the total of the song. So now we have a percentage. Again, I like to add a little debug so I can see what's going on. Let's throw it right up here. And in our preview, we should have all of those variables running. So I currently have my total, my current, and my remaining. And my percent is slowly being filled up by how much of the current time is totaling up to the total time. So currently we're at nearing right about 1%, or 10%, not 1. Anyways, so this is great. We have all of this great information that we can now use for our progress bar. So we already have that percentage variable down here, and we already have it set that if I move this tracker this scales. So I don't even have to worry about this progress bar. So what we can do now is I can add a new trigger for detect, and instead of detecting a tracker, I can instead detect an actual variable that I have now made. So in this case, the song's current time. So I can tell I'm detecting every time that current time is actively changing. In that case, I've actually realized none of these are labeled. I don't want to get confused again. So let's do a quick labeling. Tracker.x. That's what we're detecting up here. And our scale is we're scaling our progress bar. So progress-p-new. Now I know what I'm scaling. So down here, I wanted to detect the song current time. Perfect. Okay, so now I know what I'm detecting. And what do I want to have happen? I want the tracker to move based on the percent of the total time. So let's try that. Move, and we want to select our tracker. Perfect. We want to move its X value based on the percentage divided by the width of this progress bar. So actually, let's quickly check before we do anything, the progress bar's width. So we currently have it at 364. So let's go over here to our move. And in our X value, we could click our plus button to get our percentage. So now we have that, and we can simply times it by 364. Or I could have pasted it in, but I do remember. So percentage times 364, so it should actually actively tell us how far along it should be moved. So move, and this time we're going to say tracker, and let's give that a go. Let's see where that looks. So in our preview, we have all of our variables running, and in our live tab, great, our music starts here, and it started to move. Great, perfect. All right, we're on the right track, and we're getting close. So now we have a live song that detects the music as it goes. Wait a second, let's see if it works. We're going to see if it pauses and also stops these timers. It does. This is perfect. All right, great. So now we really don't have too much left to do. We simply have dragging this player down and having it exit as well. And then we have the remaining parts, which is making this draggable and actually having it change the fast forward or rewind of the song and actually placing it to where it needs to go. And then lastly, we have our two texts down here that should change as the video plays. So we only have 3 things to do. So since I've been working on the progress bar for a little bit, I want to step away from it and do drag, just because I feel like I'm getting a little overloaded with all of these variables and such. I want to take a step back. So currently we have our pause and play, and then we have our trackers for our progress. Okay, great. So what I want to do now is I want to have this drag down like Spotify. I'm going to remove all of my variables so they're not in the way. I want it, when it's up here, I want to be able to take this entire frame, and I want to be able to drag it down, and if it reaches a certain length, I want it to shoot all the way back to the bottom. Though, if it's not, like I didn't really drag it, I moved it just a little bit, I want it to actually come back up to the top. So, we've already used drag a little bit, let's use it again. So, I'm going to add a trigger, I'm going to add drag, and this time I'm going to select our player. And when I select the player, I actually want it to move it up and down. Currently, I'm going to set the limit to none, just because then if I were to limit to the screen, it actually wouldn't move at all, because once it's in the screen, it wouldn't have anywhere to move. So I'm going to set it to none, and I'm going to change my drag to player, and I'm going to change my move to player as well, so I know what I'm moving. So we currently, in our prototype, I'm going to pause the music so it doesn't play this time. If I open up my player, I can now drag it. This is great. But we have one slight issue. If I let go, nothing happens because we haven't told it to do anything yet, which is not great. So what I want to have happen is I want to drag it down, and I want it to get to, just say, about past audiobook. And if I'm past audiobook, I want it to drop, and let's say anything before it moves up. So let's work on that. So when I do a drag, I really don't have many options. I really only have move and scale and rotate. So instead of using drag to command our next feature, I want to, when I released this player frame, when I let go, I want it to complete the action. So in this case, we want to use touch up. So over here in our touch, we had tap, double tap, touch down, or touch up. So we're gonna use touch up. So touch up on our player. Let's rename that player. Perfect. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna use a conditional statement again. So condition, I want it to be that the player's y-axis, so let's just say 102. So the condition of the player's y-axis should be greater than or equal to 102. If I were to say make it equal than 102, it would have to land exactly on 102, which just right there, it didn't. If it didn't land on 102, it wouldn't complete the action, even if I went past it. So in this case, we're actually gonna use a greater than or equal than. So if it landed on 102, great. If it was anything greater than 102, it should move back to this original landing spot, which was below our preview, which is 896. So that's great, that's perfect. We're gonna move our player to 896. But we also want another condition, this time the opposite. So let's just say less than 102. So anything less than 102, we actually just want it to refresh and go back up to the top. So in that case, we have our variable, or no, we have our condition set up here, and we're gonna move it to 0. I'm gonna change it there, change it over here as well for glanceability. So now, real quick, in our preview, we have our burn, we have our select, and I can drag down, and if I let go, it moves right back up. If I move down below audiobook, it goes away. Perfect, all right. We have that set up real quick, barely did anything for it, and it works flawlessly. All right, let's get into the last little bit, the little nitty gritty of the progress bar, which may be a little harder, but we can work through it all. So currently we have our touch up and our drag. I actually want to move these over to the open and the close of the player because that's actually what they're going to be doing. They're opening and closing the player. So let's move them up here just so I have everything all neat. So again, we have our drag tracker, we have our detect tracker, and we have our detect song current time. So what we want to do next is we want to tell Protopie, hey, I am actively selecting the tracker and I want to move it all the way over here. The only problem is though is that it doesn't know that if I've moved the tracker that I need to change the position of the song. So what we want to do next is we want to work on when I select my tracker and I touch up and I let go, just kind of like what we just showed for our drag. When I let go and I touch up, I want the current time to actually change inside here. But actually what I'm really doing is I want this music's playback to seek to a different location, which I know I basically said the same thing, but I can kind of show you here. So on add trigger, on touch up, when I let go of my tracker, so we're gonna do tracker. When I let go of that tracker, what I want to have happen is I want to change, which I mentioned earlier in our playback, I want to seek. And I want to seek David Kushner audio. Okay, now we want to, instead of seeking it to a specific time of this audio, we actually want to change the formula. So currently we have a percentage of the current time and song, but we can reverse engineer it. And we can actually do the opposite, which is take the X value of our tracker and make a percentage value out of the total length of our progress. So what we can do here is we could do tracker and we could do .x. So that will give us our X value and we can divide it by 364. So let's just say it was at 146 divided by 364, be a little bit less than halfway. So that's great. We know it's a little bit less than halfway, but we now need to actually change that percentage to our total time. So what we can do here is I'll bracket or parentheses my current equation so I don't affect it when I times it by the total time of the song. So that way I get the percentage of where the song should be seeking to. I know that sounded like a lot, but what we should have happen is we should seek audio to tracker. That's all we're doing. So in our preview, we head down, I hit pause, I'm gonna move it, if I can grab it, I'm gonna move it to here, let go. Something's not working. seems to be wanting to go back, but it only went back a little bit there. We're having an issue. Let's turn on all of our variables again to see if there's something that I'm missing. Okay, let's preview it. So we have all of our percentages running, everything's looking good. And if I hit pause, we're at 0.3%. And when I drag and I release, it seems to want to move, but it's moving it to what should be 0.6. That was 60%, but yet it went back. Okay, it looks to be a timing issue. So what we currently have is we have our move tracker for our song, which realistically it should be instantly. But what is happening is that this is conflicting with our seek because it's trying to detect the song's current time and move the tracker, even though we are the ones trying to move the tracker. So I'm going to do two things here to convince myself that it will work. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a start delay, something really small. Realistically, it shouldn't actually affect any change. I'm going to make this 0, and I'll make this 0.1. So barely any difference. So hopefully that should change at least one of the issues going on, but I'm actually going to do another one, which I'm going to, on touch down, when I select the tracker, I actually don't want the detection to run. I don't want to move the tracker based on the current time if I'm actually trying to move it myself. That way it should hopefully clear up any extra issues I was having when it was resetting. So on touchdown, what I want to have happen is I want to have my tracker, so when I'm selecting my tracker, I'm touching down on it. I want to actually make a variable. I'm going to basically make my own Boolean variable. So I'm going to say tracker selected. So this should hopefully, I'm going to start it at 0 and I'll change it to 1. So I'm going to go over into my actions. I'm going to change it to assign. I'm going to go to tracker selected. And I'm simply going to change it to 1. All I'm doing. So I'm assigning tracker selected is equal to 1. All I'm doing here is I'm telling myself that, okay, tracker has been selected. And in this case, I could do over here, I could change it to be tracker selected as to 0. So I've unselected my tracker. But in that middle bit, when my tracker is selected, I could make it so that this doesn't run. So in this case, I could make a condition called tracker selected. And when that variable is equal to 0, I can make it so that that moves. So it only is detecting the song's current time, and it's only moving the tracker if I'm not the one moving the tracker. Hopefully that should clear up this issue that we just had. So let's give that a preview. Preview. Got our variable still running, looking good. Now I'm going to pause it just to see if it works when it was paused. So I moved to here, I let go. Perfect. It's been moved to here and I've let go. So now, theoretically, since I've moved it to here and it's changed the song's current time, I should play and it should actually play the song from this position. Now, even though it's playing, I can move and let go. Perfect. Okay. Now let's get rid of you. Let's hop back in. We've got one last thing to do. Currently we have these two texts, which things are going to get a little fun. So we're going to use our current variables that we have already made, and we're actually going to change these texts. So let's first work on current, and then we'll work on remaining. So down here, what I want to have happen is every time I'm detecting a change in the current song's time, I want this value, which is current time, to change the same as the remaining. So current time, I'm going to make into this condition, I'm going to add a text value. And instead of saying what I want, I'm going to instead, once I've selected the layer, which we don't actually have any layers selected. That's because over here, these two text layers currently are not actually selectable unless you can make them editable inside of Protopie. So right now, 110, I'll make editable. Currently, it has a font that isn't actually in Protopie. So in that case, I'm going to change it just to Inter for now. Hopefully that should work for you as well. And I'm going to quickly do the same thing over here for this text. I don't want you guys to have a font that doesn't work, so let's try Inter. Perfect. Okay. Now we have both of these fonts, both of these texts that actually can be changed. So again, in our text, I'm going to select what is 1:10? That should be our current time. So I'm going to change to formula, and I'm going to try to make it the current time. This is where things get a little confusing. So we're going to need a couple things in our formulas to help smooth this out. Currently, in our functions, we have a couple things going on that we'll need. One is going to be floor, which if we scroll all the way down into math, we find floor. All it's going to do is it's going to return the nearest whole number down. So that means like if I'm 2.99, it's going to move it down to 2. That way we'll actually get a whole number every time we're playing our audio. And then also we'll need another very cool one, which is called lpad, which is all the way up here. Basically, it just means a left pad, a text with another text to a specific length. This will help cut our variable down into 2 different segments. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head back over here, and what I want to have happen is, one, I want to be able to create this 1 value. I always want it to round down, because like if I'm at 61 seconds, I don't want to round it up because then it's going to round it up to 2. What I want it to do is I want to divide the current time by 60, and then I want to floor it. So basically all I'm doing is I'm taking, let's just say again, 61, dividing it by 60, and then I can floor that number, and I can tell myself, okay, I'm just going to have 1 right here. I know it seems a little confusing, but I'll show you as I work through this variable. Then I need to have a little semicolon right here, and then right here on these 2 numbers, I'm going to have an lpad along with the current time, and again, I'm going to put in the modal, which basically is like a remainder for your values, and then I'm going to put in 60 because that is my modal going over. Basically anything over 60 is over here, but everything inside 60 is here. So again, 61 would mean it's a minute and 1 second. And then I'm going to add a 2 and then a 0. So I'll kind of show you guys as I'm going, so hopefully you guys can understand. So floor, and then I'm going to need to look for my song's current remaining time, or just current time, not remaining time. Current time divided by 60. So this should give us that little text right there. Inside Protopie, if you want to add more to your formula, it's simply plus. But I'm going to add something to my formula that is actually just text. So in that case, I'm going to use quotes, and then I'll put in inside what I want to be just the text. Then I got to finish those quotes off, and I'm going to do plus. Perfect. Now, things get a little confusing, but I'll walk you through it. So we got lpad, and then we're going to look for our song's current time. Perfect. All right, song's current time, and then we're going to use our modal or our percentage, and we're going to have it percentages of 60. And then we're going to have 2 of those values, and then we're going to do, in quotes, 0. Perfect. All right. I just realized I've been saying modular or modula, or whatever I was saying. I meant to be saying this, modulo, which basically is the operation of division that will give us the remainder that we're looking for. So I know I realized I was giving a kind of a bad explanation for it. We're basically just trying to find the remainder of 60, 2 of those, and if it doesn't have anything, we're displaying zeros. So that's all I'm doing, which is if nothing, display 2 zeros. If something, what is the value of that modular will be placed there along with the first interval of our segment. So we have that for there. What we're going to do now is we're simply going to select all, and we're simply going to make that text be current time, and we're going to duplicate it. Actually, I didn't need to duplicate it up here. We're just going to duplicate it down here. And so instead, now we're going to change to this text, which is our remaining time. So hold over here, remaining time. If I click this, I do remaining time, so on remaining time, because we already made that variable over here. Same thing over here, song remaining time. We should be able to simply drop those 2 in. Hopefully, we should have those ones working as well. Remaining time. Okay, let's give a look to see if everything's working. I'm actually going to remove these barrels for once to see what everything looks like. All right, preview. We have our little button. We have our play pause. It's great. And here, oh, we have something a little funky going on. I think this is my mistake because of how I've set it up. I think I have 1 too many decimal places being shown. But we have floor. Okay, I think I've realized this. Even though I turned off of these variables, I think they're important for this. Basically, what I've done is I've used floor to help reduce the number right here, or right here, so what would have been 3 minutes, I've rounded it down to 2:57. But it actually is at even a lower percentage, is at 257.8. But that's because up here, I haven't actually floored my variable. So basically, all of my variables are running on percentage values. So that will be displayed down here. I don't really want that. I want it to be 0 minutes and 2 seconds, and 2 minutes and 57. So currently, we need to change that as well. So let's head back actually over to our existing formulas, and let's change that. So inside our formulas, let's put a parenthesis around them, and then let's add floor, which is going to round our number down. I selected it and added a couple extra parentheses. Okay, we floored that one, and all you have to do is floor this one. Hopefully it should be good. So floor, oh, one less O, parenthesis, and then let's head to the end, and then let's add a parenthesis there. Okay, let's see if that works now. So in our preview, okay, great, this is looking better. We're on actual intervals rather than little bits of decimal points. Now if we head back in, oh my God, that's looking much better. We're getting intervals of actual seconds, and we're getting intervals of actual seconds here. Perfect. Okay, we have actually one smaller thing that I don't know if you guys have noticed. Currently, we have this live tab. This progress bar isn't actually doing anything, but this is. So we're gonna do roughly the same thing of correlating these two to be the same object. So we're gonna go over here. I'm just gonna get rid of these variables for now. And we're gonna move back to our drag track detect tracker. This is actually what we're looking for. We don't need to do a whole new version of this because it's only happening in one place. I'm not going to change the tracker up here. I'm only changing the tracker down here because that, as shown here, this scale is only happening in one place. So actually all we have to do for our final thing is simply come down here to our progress, and we can hit scale. Actually, we could actually just copy our existing scale because then we don't have to change our existing formula. We can simply change which one we've selected. So in this case, we're looking for progress. Okay, perfect. Progress is now there as well. And in this graph, I think this one, let me see, I don't know if this will have the same issue as last time. It does. I'm glad we checked. Currently, it's in the center. We don't really want that. So let's move it to the far left. Hopefully, now this progress bar should move this way, which is what we're looking for. So let's do one final restart and see where we are. So preview, did take a sec, but that did load in. And now it's progressing, hopefully, at the same rate as this. So if I were to jump up with my tracker, move it up here, and pause, let's scroll back down and see. Okay, perfect. It's moved a little bit. One last final thing. I tried to grab this tracker right here and I missed. We're not trying to drag anything else right here. And I know I can drag this player, but realistically, what I'm trying to do is click on this tracker. So I'm gonna quickly do one last final thing, which is some kind of housekeeping, which is on this tracker, just like we did earlier with the back button, I'm gonna take the touch area and I'm gonna increase it. Let's go 20. Look at that. That's a much bigger box for me to actually be able to click on when I'm trying to drag this tracker. That way I can miss just a little bit and I'm not accidentally moving the entire player. I think that should help a little bit. And then one final thing that I've noticed as well is we have these jagged edges over here on our player. So with Spotify, I think they have this rounded edges aesthetic, so I want to make sure we match that. So over here in our player, I've shrunken these down so I can see. I'm going to make sure I click player. Also, when you click a object that has a action or trigger, you'll be able to see all of the actual correlations they have over here, which I don't know if you guys have seen before. I just want to make sure you guys see now. So if you're ever looking for something that isn't selected, or oh, I want this progress bar to move, but I don't actually have it selected, you can always either one, select the progress bar, see it over here, or select the progress bar in here. So in this case, I'll just do the back arrow because I know that was selected, and it selects here. It also highlights over here. I know that was just a quick last minute, but again, player over here, I wanted to change the radius. So I'm gonna head over to details, radius, and let's give it 24. See how that looks? That's a little small. We'll give it like a 36. That looks a little bit better. Okay, I think we're looking good. We gave ourselves a little bit of a bigger touch target. We rounded some corners, and I think things are looking good. So this is one final preview. We have our audio playlist. We have our live progress down here. We have a play pause on the live tab. On the tab, I can drag down. Oh, look at those rounded corners. That looks a little bit better. Now if I drop down below, it should drop down. If I drop just a little bit, it should head right back up. I have a time for both the current time of the song, the remaining song. I have a draggable tracker. I have a play pause down here that also works, and I have a live video. So there we go. That is the finalized live player for your Spotify.